So wait a minute, are you telling me that I can play a card here, it gets destroyed, I get more energy that I can use to play more cards for more power? Well, yes, Cletus. This week's featured location, the Altar of Death, when you play a card here, destroying it gets you +2 energy the next turn. So if you play a card here, you could have extra energy over what you would normally have in the following turn. So now let's take a look at a few cards and see just exactly how we could take advantage of the Altar of Death. First of all, with cards being destroyed when they're played there, it might be hard to get some cards to stick and stay there. One way that you can do that is by using cards like Squirrel Girl, Hela, Doctor Doom, Debris, and White Tiger that all throw cards into other lanes other than where they were played. So you could play those cards in other lanes and throw a few cards into the featured location, thus allowing you to have some cards that actually stay in that location. Another strategy is to play cards that, when played there, even when they're destroyed, they leave something behind. Brood and Mr. Sinister both leave cards behind after they're played, and they're destroyed. If you play Bucky Barnes at the Altar of Death, then when he's destroyed, he'll leave behind the Winter Soldier. You could also try to get some power into the Altar of Death without ever playing a card there by using Claw or Mr. Fantastic, both of which give adjacent locations power. Some cards have a downside to playing them. For example, Electro, Mr. Negative, and the Hood all have the downside of still being on the board after you play them. Electro forcing you to play only one card, Mr. Negative and the Hood giving you negative stats. You can play Electro, Mr. Negative, or the Hood, and then those three cards, you'll get the effect of them. However, the card itself will be destroyed, removing the downside of those cards. A card like Yellow Jacket, who normally gives -1 to all your other cards at that location, will be destroyed. However, you still get the benefit of the 2 extra energy in your next turn. So for playing Yellow Jacket for 0, you get 2 energy on your next turn. Some cards have a habit of sticking around. Armor and Professor X are 2 cards that you can play at the Altar of Death, that after you play them, cards there can't be destroyed, and so they won't be destroyed, so they'd stick around. The same is with Colossus, who, when played, he can't be destroyed, and Wolverine, when played and destroyed, gets moved to a random location. That random location could be the Altar of Death or one of the other locations, but it's still a card that you can play and gain the +2 energy and still be able to have the card left on your board. Another strategy you could use is to play Scarlet Witch or Storm that changes the location. If you do this early in a match, it changes the location and then your opponent can play there as well. However, if you get to round 6 and nobody has any cards at that location, you can throw a Storm or a Scarlet Witch at that location. They'll change the location and then they won't be destroyed. And if your opponent hasn't gotten anything to stick there yet, then you could secure a win that way. Since when a card is destroyed at the location, you gain +2 energy in the next round. Another strategy could be to have some low-cost cards in your hand whose sole purpose is to be destroyed to feed bigger plays later down the road. Cards like Iceman and Yondu have powerful on-reveal effects and only cost 1 energy. However, the +2 energy on your next round could be a big boon to you. Cards like Deadpool also give you the +2 energy in the next round, but when he's destroyed, his power is doubled and he's sent back to your hand. So if you played him and his power gets doubled to 2, and then you play him again and it gets doubled to 4, and you play it again to an 8 and again to a 16. I did math! That's a lot of power you can be dropping on that last turn. So keep those cards in mind if you want to play a lot of low-cost cards to get the extra energy. A final strategy to use could be simply a Move It deck. decks where you play cards in other locations and then you can move your cards into different locations, or cards themselves like Nightcrawler and Vision that move, allow you to play cards in different locations and then move the cards to the Altar of Death. That way the card moved there won't be destroyed, and you could possibly secure wins by moving cards in there and your opponent not being able to. So those are some powerful individual cards that you can play into this location, the Altar of Death. It's the featured location, and keep in mind the featured location only shows up in 40% of matches, so you still need to have a deck worthy of winning some matches outside of games in which this one shows up. However, throwing 2 or 3 of these cards into a deck, or playing a deck that already uses some of these cards, could allow you to secure a lot of wins during the next 48 hours while this location is being featured. Another card that could benefit greatly that I didn't list earlier is Death. Death, when cards are destroyed, has its cost reduced. So if both you and your opponent are playing cards into the Altar of Death and those cards are being destroyed, you could be getting a really cheap death. Check out my link over here to a deck I made that is Death Wave. Uses Wave to get out Death even cheaper. That might be a good deck for this week's featured location. Otherwise, best of luck to you during this featured location, and I hope that my suggestions help you to climb the ladder. And until we see each other again, keep on snapping.